President Benedict, thank you so much. My mom is in the audience, and she might be thinking, I didn't know you went up there to visit him. Good day to the regents, the faculty, the family, the alumni, distinguished guests, and especially to the graduates, to the class of 2014. I am so honored to be with you here today. And I'm also honored to share the stage with Karen Bachman. Congratulations on your honorary degree. You are an inspiration to all of us. Thank you very much for your service and for using your passion to lift us all up. Thank you for allowing me to speak with all of you today and for allowing me to return to my beloved state of Minnesota. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to be here at this wonderful institution. When you heard President Benedict talk about my voice, some of you may be familiar with that because I'm betting that some of you are prisoners of public radio yourself. Maybe raised in households where you were forced to listen at the kitchen table when you were doing your homework, or in the back seat of the car. Despite all the things that you say, I'm mainly a girl that talks on the radio and a girl that listens, a woman who listens, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I love college graduations. And one of the things I love so much about college graduations is that it is a moment filled with possibility and awe. There are some of you out there whose parents are looking forward and looking at the backs of your head and wondering, you know, I'm so proud of you. Some of them you can't see your parents because they're behind you, but they're smiling so broadly because they're so happy for this day. But some of them also might have been wondering if you were going to make it to this day. Some of them wondered if they were going to make it to this day. Your dreams may have exceeded their savings accounts. But you know what? They made it work. And we all know that in some cases, your family's dreams may have exceeded your ability to get up for that 8 a.m. class consistently. But you made it work. And you all made it to this spectacular moment. And I say you all made it because those of you wearing those tassels did not get here by yourself. You had a lot of help. And I know this for a fact because my family continues to provide me with the wind beneath my sails. I am here today with my mother, who lives here in the state of Minnesota, and my young cousin, Kiara Ray, who is a Benny herself. And this means that this experience has deepened for me because we have a Benny in the family. And just a word about my mother. I just want to give her a quick shout out, and a shout out to parents in general. My mother taught me an important lesson. Never give up on a dream just because of the time it'll take to accomplish it. I was able to walk across the stage at my college graduation, which was about 1,000 years ago, but I was able to do that because Betty Norris told me to hold on to my dreams and to nurture them, and I'm able to return to this stage today because she continues to support me. I was a kid who grew up with a little bit of a speech impediment. You notice that I have a script in front of me now that I have to look down on because my dreams didn't necessarily match my skill set as a young person. It's amazing, especially to me, that I make my living in communication, given the fact that speaking was not always easy for me. So I wanted to give a shout out to my mother because she's here. And I want to give a shout out to the parents in the audience because they're here. And I want you to think about that support system that you have had because it is as strong as the pillars that hold up the ceiling above us. You are here because you had a support system. So for all the parents and the grandparents and the guardians who stayed up late to help you study for the SATs, who sacrificed new cars and vacations, who dined on leftovers more than they care to remember, the families that postponed home repairs and dental surgery so they could sock away money for your tuition, and also the families that not so long ago arrived here from distant places, from Vietnam and Somalia, Thailand and Mexico, former Soviet republics, speaking little English and possessing little more than the dream that you might one day march across this stage. This is your day. But I'm going to ask you to take just a minute of your time to thank all of the people who made this day possible. Please Give your families a nod of thanks, a great big round of applause. And if you feel like it, say their names out loud. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Now, I know you all came here with the expectation that I might pass on morsels of wisdom and share a few stories about life and love and liberty or something like that. But I also know that the most important expectation that you had is that I not talk too long. And so I will try to honor that so you can get your hands on that important piece of paper that you've worked so hard for and go forth and celebrate this next chapter in your lives. That piece of paper is tremendously important, but it represents something that carries even more currency. How will you use the knowledge that you absorbed in the pursuit of that degree? How will you harness that knowledge to become the caretakers of our culture, our politics, our economy, our moral compass, and our national character? How will you reach across cultures and disciplines and dialects to solve the world's problems? Because in a whole lot of areas, the current caretakers have left behind a bit of a mess. We need you to solve the world's problems. And we need you to light a candle for the world with the power of your mind and the strength of your ideas. I'm a journalist now, but when I first went to college, I was studying electrical engineering. I studied electrical engineering for 3.5 years and then changed my major after 3.5 years with the finish line in sight. I decided I wanted to work in communications, to be a journalist, and it's a bit of an understatement to say that my parents flipped out when I changed my major. I mean, they really flipped out. And I know that that's a turn of phrase, but my father in particular almost turned over. He was fatoutzed. He almost did a backward flip. Because engineers build things, tangible things, building, bridges, medical devices, chemical compounds. I wanted to be a journalist, though. I felt a different calling, and I wanted to be a newspaper journalist at first. And my parents thought, well, wait, newspapers are what you use to wrap up fish, before you put them in the freezer. But eventually my parents came around and they gave me their blessings, and they gave me confidence in my decision. It was something in particular that my father said that let me know that we were going to be okay. That ideas can outlast even the strongest structures. There's something to that. There's something important to that. Long after dynasties have fallen and bridges have crumbled, long after currency is frayed around the edges and monuments have turned to dust, ideas survive. I look out at your faces, at the sisterhood here, and I feel such a swell of pride and hope, and I know that you will embrace the honor of entering that special fellowship of highly educated women, but I also pray that you will accept the responsibilities that come along with this privilege, the responsibility to uphold the most important of ideas. We're hoping that your generation will not just be smart, but will also be wise. And you have a great start on that because of the creed that you follow here at this university. How wonderful the world would be if we all took these values and pasted them somewhere where we could see them every single day, those Benedictine values. To have awareness of God, to look for God in everyday events, and not just in the sunsets and the beauty of falling snowflakes, but also in the devastation after a tornado or a family tragedy. Those Benedictine values tell us to look for God everywhere, to look for God in the rubble after an earthquake in a place like Haiti. Looking for God, even in those toughest moments, gives us hope and strength and a blueprint for what we need to do to make things better. Those values ask us to work toward justice in our immediate environment, but also in a larger society. Those values tell us to strive for peace and appreciate the dignity of work and to respect each person, regardless of class or cultural background or professional skill. And those values ask that you listen. Listen with the ear of your heart, to listen keenly and sensitively, to hear the voices of all people and all created beings. And I want to spend just a little bit of time focusing on that idea, listening, and what it means to be a good listener. It's probably no surprise that someone who makes a living talking on the radio would want to spend a little bit of time talking about listening, and I promise that I'm not going to break out into some sort of NPR fundraising drive. I'm not going to pass out mugs or tote bags or deliver weather on the 8s. Although I do hope you are indeed avid radio listeners, particularly NPR listeners. But I'm talking about a different kind of listenership. I'm talking about the importance of taking in the outside world, of being open to the outside world through all of your senses. The particular importance of the power of listening. And this is particularly important, I think, for your generation and for this moment. And I realize this because I spent a lot of time visiting college campuses talking about the work I do through the Race Card Project. And I realized something after spending so much time on college campuses in the past few years, and it's particularly pronounced on college campuses, although you see it everywhere. I'm talking about when you walk around, those things that always seem to be hanging from your ears. You know what I'm talking about? Those earbuds, headsets, earphones, Bluetooth head jacks, all those little devices that are attached to your head. You know what I'm talking about. You see them everywhere, swarms of students moving about campus in their own little world, talking out loud sometimes to someone on a phone half a world away, lost in the rhythm of the music that only they can hear. There are dance parties that kids go to where they don't play music out loud. Instead, everyone tunes into the same station, and they all listen to the music and dance, all in the same rhythm, but they're not actually listening to the music collectively. They're listening individually. This hit me when I visited the University of Wisconsin, where I did the first 3 years of my undergraduate study. There's this big hill in the center of campus. It's called Bascom Hill. And I remember visiting the campus, and when I was walking up that hill, I could judge whether I was in good shape or not because we were always talking about something as we tried to walk up the hill. And if I was in good shape, I could have a conversation about the events of the day or this great new album that I was fascinated with. And if I wasn't in good shape, I was huffing and puffing my way as I tried to get up that hill. And when I returned to campus, I realized something. When I was up on a morning run, charging up that hill, there was utter silence. The students were all walking with each other, but everybody had a headset on. No one was talking to each other. Everyone was lost in their own little world, and I was so struck by that silence that I wrote about it at the time. I said, people always predict or perhaps pray that the millennials will lead the conversation about difficult topics because their alleged ease with subjects like race or gay marriage or divides in gender or religion. That morning, it was hard to imagine those young people leading any kind of conversation. Even in the student union, where students gather for breakfast, in the same place they gather for pilsners of beer later in the day, young people were seated in silence over bowls of cereal and oatmeal, listening to music or texting furiously to someone somewhere else while ignoring the person sitting inches away. I wondered if that represented progress. I'm not sure it does. Why those earbuds really do close out the world to allow us to listen to our favorite music or phone calls or some sort of scintillating podcast, they serve as a metaphor for something else. And I worry that we're losing the ability to listen closely to each other and to listen to ourselves. And this should maybe cause us some concern. All of our senses are important, but listening is a particularly important skill. It allows us to understand our environment faster than any other sense. Before you can touch something, before you can fully comprehend what you see, the body is already processing sound. A chain of neurons form in your ears, and your spine triggers all kinds of responses. And I recognize that not everyone has the ability to hear or even to hear clearly, but they have the ability to connect with others, and sometimes using other senses, but that's harder to do when everyone has their own personal sound booth, when everyone is lost in their own world. Sometimes you have to be where you are. Sometimes you have to be where you are. You see, sometimes in your lifetimes, for the young people here, people stopped experiencing concerts and sporting events and birthday parties and started using small handheld devices to document the moment for future enjoyment. Sometime in your lifetime, people started wearing headphones 24/7. Sometime in your lifetime, people stopped experiencing something, but rather experiencing it through the phone. I took my kids to a Beyonce concert, which makes me the coolest mom in the world. And A Beyonce concert is something to behold. There's this big stage, and she's whipping her hair around, and she's dancing in ways that I don't dare do in a place like this. And she walks out into it's almost like a peninsula, the stage that goes out into the audience, and she walks her way out there, and as she does this, it's this moment that she's supposed to connect with the audience. She's singing this torch song, and she's putting her hand out to people, and she wants to connect and to make eye contact. And you know what she sees on the other side of the stage? Everyone's holding up a phone, taking a picture of the moment. Not in the moment. She literally can't find anyone who has a free hand to grab hers because they're all taking a picture of the moment. They're not in the moment. The concern is that we're losing the ability to actively listen and to engage in deep and meaningful conversations or to connect with each other. As we pull deeper inside ourselves, are we putting less of a premium on engagement? What are we missing when we tune out to the outside world? I think quite a bit about this because of the work that I do through this exercise I've been involved in for the past 4 years. I run something called the Race Card Project. When you came in this room, you may have had a postcard on your seat that asked you to think about the word race and to share your thoughts in just 6 words. I collect stories about race in 6 words, stories about race and cultural identity, really short stories. They're only 6 words long. And you see, I was trying to figure out when I started this project how to jumpstart an open and candid conversation about race. So I asked people to think about their views, experiences, their observations, their triumphs, their laments, or their anthem, and to condense it to 1 sentence, and then to make it interesting to go 1 step further, to reduce that sentence to just 6 words. And people share those 6-word thoughts with me on those postcards, or they email them to me through a large website that I run. And I had no idea when I first started this, that people would take the bait. My husband thought I was crazy for spending our money on all those postcards. My mom, who, as I noted, was in the audience, thought I was a little bit crazy, but as a retired postal worker, she was really happy that I was supporting the U.S. Postal Service. And I had no idea if people would actually send in their thoughts. But people took the bait. A lot of people took the bait. Of the first 200 cards I printed, about 30% came back to me, and so I printed more and more, and through the website I collect these cards, and now tens of thousands of people have sent in their 6-word stories, their 6-word essays, their 6-word thoughts on race, and in many cases those 6 words are just a beginning. They go on to submit full essays and accompanying comments explaining why they chose those 6 particular words, and you'd be amazed at how much people could pack into just a small package. We must live with our ghost, 6 words. White people, not the only bigots, 6 words. Not better or worse, just different. Stolen land, identity adrift, we persevere, 6 words. The 6-word statements are sharp-edged and clear-eyed and honest. Oh boy, are they honest. Reason I ended a sweet relationship. I'm only Asian when it's convenient. You're not really black. White, not allowed to be proud. No, you cannot touch my hair. Please stop saying I am articulate. Grandma, you can't say that anymore. Grandma sent $100 when we broke up. Sometimes they're upbeat, sometimes they're offbeat. Only one race, the human race. Human DNA, 99% the same. Checked cosmic in the race box. Total non-issue when the aliens arrive. Underneath, we all taste like chicken. The submissions are funny and painful and complex and very revealing. And they have provided a lesson for me more powerful than anything I've ever heard in a classroom or a newsroom. People often tell me that conversations about race or the subject of race forms a kind of silent force field where people are afraid to talk openly about it. To do so is much like walking through a minefield. Take a misstep and the results are potentially catastrophic or embarrassing. The race card experiment gives people a portal for that conversation, and it underscores that race is broader than we often realize. It does not just involve people with darker skins or urban backgrounds. For instance, on college campuses, I've often heard from small-town students who feel marginalized because their families lack education or wealth. I've heard from Asians and Middle Easterners or Eastern Europeans who feel left out of discussions about race. Students who come from distant lands say they never even thought about race until they came to America, where everyone seems to be pushing forms in their direction, asking them to check little boxes that define their identity. In this country, even at this moment, it's easy to see how race and diversity and the debate over diversity can be a burden. It's easy to see it as a burden because the debate over equity and opportunity has created all kinds of side-eye assumptions and divides. And sure, the debate can be burdensome and tricky, but I want you to think of it perhaps in a different way. And I was reminded of this when I did some research not long ago in the lead up to the anniversary for the March on Washington. I was looking at old clips and coverage of the March on Washington, which took place in the National Mall in August of 1963. And in the coverage of the march, particularly the overseas coverage, foreign journalists who were writing about that moment, they noted something. They were struck by the diversity in America. And in America, this was something interesting because in 1963, in August of 63, it was the first large mass march in this country, and it was also the first large mass march where people of different colors were all in one place. And for those people who came together, it was the first time many of them had actually stood next to someone of another race. You've heard of that moment, that spontaneous moment where people locked hands and started singing, "We Shall Overcome." Well, in that moment, that was the first time that many people had actually clasped the hand of someone of another race. When journalists overseas wrote about that moment, they were wowed by the tapestry of humanity they saw in America. And in many cases, they still are. If you look at coverage overseas of this country, people marvel at our diversity. They often call it the Great American Tapestry. And they see it as one of the things that makes this country great. They would visit a campus like this, and they would note that it's one of the things that makes this campus great. And the question is, do we see it that way? Do we see diversity as our strength? Do we see this tapestry as a strength or a burden? My generation may have done your generation a bit of a disservice by repeatedly telling you that race is a difficult subject to talk about. It has become this self-fulfilling prophecy, this notion that race is a toxic topic. Racism is toxic. I hope that in my lifetime we truly get to a post-racism society. But race, well, that describes who we are. A country of many races and faiths and creeds and backgrounds. A multi-hued, variegated sea of humanity that represents all kinds of diversity. Race, gender, religion, socioeconomic status, military service, geographic alliance, dialect. And of course there are things that will divide any group with all that variegation, but there are also the things that connect us. Our humanity, our collective interest in this planet that we all occupy, our devotion to the Vikings and the twins. Your graduation, it coincides with an important judicial milestone in this country. Today is May 17th. And on May 17, 1954, Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren delivered a unanimous ruling in the landmark civil rights case Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. And that ruling held that state-sanctioned segregation of public schools was a violation of the 14th Amendment and therefore was unconstitutional. Now, that ruling did not mean segregation in all places would end. It took another decade with the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 to make segregation in places like bus terminals and movie theaters and restaurants illegal. And while you know the phrase Brown versus Board of Education, do you know the people that represents? Linda Brown and her sister Cheryl Brown, now Cheryl Brown Henderson. Linda Brown was a third-grade student, and when you look back at the coverage of that day, she was this small child who was attending school or attempting to attend school and walking past a sea of people who had emotions of all kind evident on their faces. A combination of hatred and frustration, folks who just seemed to be perplexed. Why would they want to upset the apple cart like this? Can't we just keep things the way they are? Over time, the lawsuit and the push for integration gained momentum, spurred on by laws and court rulings that were championed by and issued by leaders who themselves grew up in segregated circumstances, but were able to hear the winds of change. They were able to see the country was changing, and they were able to hear arguments that opened up their mind and their hearts. Because your graduation falls on this day, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to look around, to literally look around. Use your neck. Look to your right and look to your left. Look behind you. Look at this room. You too. You too. Look around. And as you do, understand that what you see as you look around is something that you should never take for granted, because in this country, and even in this great state of Minnesota with all of its tolerance and political correctness, and I say that with love in my heart, even in this state, a room of this composition would have been unusual not long ago, even within my lifetime. A room of this composition would have made a lot of people uncomfortable, and in many places in America, it would have been illegal. Understand, please, as you go out into the world, the courage required to recreate an environment that we now see as just standard. Never take that for granted. Never take this for granted. No matter how far you travel after graduation, no matter how far your talents and your dreams and your new skills take you, make sure that a piece of this moment always lives in you. That a piece of this magnificent institution always lives with you. And before I leave, before I step aside, just a little quick advice. When you go out into the world, think about the people who helped create this environment. And think of what it took. So please, as you push us further along and try to create an even better world for the next generation, please be bold. Please be kind, be gracious, be curious, be where you are. Don't be afraid of change. It's a waste of time. Write your future in pencil. It's easier to erase if you change your mind. Write an occasional letter, not an email, an actual letter. And this said by someone who was raised by 2 postal workers. Nothing can match the grace and impact of a handwritten letter on lovely stationery. Email is fine, but a letter, especially a love letter, is something that can be cherished in a shoebox under your bed. As you go out and conquer the world, you will do well to remember all those who make your life a little easier, a little more comfortable, a little safer. The folks that park your car, clean your office, the people who stay behind in this room to clean up this hall when you've headed off to your celebrations. When you see a person with a shovel or a broom or a construction hat, remember that while they may not share your zip code or your professional fraternity or sorority in this case, I am willing to bet they share your aspirations and they may share your values or your love of this great state. When you honor all those you encounter, you lift up this university this college in a very special way. Take care of each other. Take care of this planet. Take time for the people that you love, because nothing matters more. To the class of 2014, it has been such an honor to be with you today. Go out and get your blessings. They're waiting for you. Thank you.